So our goal at this point is that we can solve quadratics in various ways, and we can do that successfully each time. So when we're looking at solving quadratics, okay, we have some different options that we can use to solve them. Okay, so we're going to sort of just remind ourselves of the different things and make sure we're okay with those key components and solving them correctly. So let's say we have something like x squared minus 36 equals 0, and we want to solve this for x. And we can solve this by taking a square root because there's no x to the first power in this. So I can undo subtracting 36 by adding 36, which gives me x squared equals 36. And then I can undo the exponent of 2 by square rooting each side. How many answers will this problem have? Okay, we should have picked 2 because when we take the square root of 36, remember we have plus and minus 6, which means we have a positive 6 as an answer and a negative 6 as an answer. Okay, now another option, or I don't know if option, but another requirement is that we can solve quadratics with the quadratic formula. So let's say we are given x squared plus 6x equals 27. Is this in the correct form to solve using the quadratic formula? We should have said no, because for the quadratic formula, we need it to be equal to 0. Okay, so we need to set this equal to 0. So we will undo a positive 27 by subtracting 27. And having now x squared plus 6x minus 27 equals 0. So now that we are in the correct format, now we need to find A, B, and C. So A in this situation is 1. B is 6. What does C equal? We should have said negative 27 because there is that subtraction sign in front of it. Okay, now that we're here, we can plug this into the quadratic formula. Okay, if you don't remember our formula, I'll write it down over here. Minus 4ac all over 2a. So we will say negative b, so in this case 6. So negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 6 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 27, all over what? We should have said 2 times 1, right? 2 times a. What do we want to do next to finish simplifying and getting an answer here? Our next step is what we should have picked is that we're doing what's underneath the square root. So in our calculators, right, we should have done the part underneath the square root. We should have our 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 27. Okay, and we get 144. Okay, so now we're going to take the square root of 144. Again, we could do that in our calculators. And then we need 2 options. Okay, so one option is going to say negative 6 plus 12 over 2. And one option is going to say negative 6 minus 12 over 2. What are the 2 final answers that we get? Well, when we look at this, right, negative 6 plus 12 is 6 over 2, so 3 should have been one of our answers. Negative 6 minus 12 is a negative 18. Oops, didn't mean to write that twice. Over 2. So our other answer should have been negative 9. So we should have x is 3 and x is negative 9. Okay, so let's look at another example here that we can solve. Let's say we want to solve x squared plus 6x minus 4 equals 0. Is this in the correct form to use the quadratic formula? We should have selected yes because it's set equal to 0, so we're good to go. What does a equal in this problem? We should have picked 1. B is 6. And C is -4. So we'll then start plugging into our formula. So we'll say -6 plus or minus 6 squared minus 4 times A times what? Yep, -4, right? This is C, and C is -4, all over 2 times A. So for our next step, we want to simplify what is underneath the square root. So again, you can use your calculator. And we get out 52. Now, if we take the square root of 52 in our calculator, we get this big old long decimal, which is not good. So what do we want to do next instead? Right, we need to simplify this square root of 52. So we're going to do that by prime factoring. Right, so we're just going to find numbers that we can split 52 into. So how about 2 and 26? 2 and 13. Okay, and we're going to circle the pairs. Where do our pairs need to go? Right, we should have said out in front, and they count one time. So we'll say 2 square root 13. Okay, so now instead of the square root of square root of 52, we now have 2 square root 13. So we have -6 plus or minus 2 square root 13 all over 2. Is this our final answer? Right, we should have selected no because we still have more work to do. Right, we want to look at all of the numbers outside of the square root and see if there is a number we can reduce them all by. Well, 2 will go evenly into each of these. So I can divide each of these numbers by 2. So I'll say -3 plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1. Do I want to divide that 13 by 2? We should have said no because it's inside the square root, so that stays put. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So really for our final answer, we could just leave this as -3 plus or minus the square root of 13. How many answers is this? Right, this is definitely 2 answers because we have 1 answer with the positive and 1 answer with the negative. Let's say we want to solve 3x squared minus 2x plus 9 equals 0. So A equals 3. What does B equal? We should have picked -2. C equals 9. So when we start plugging this into the quadratic formula, the first thing we write is -b. What value would we write for -b? We should have said +2, right? Because the negative of -2 becomes positive. Plus or minus negative 2 squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. Use your calculator and then determine what number we get under the square root. Okay, so when we did this, right, if you're typing this in your calculator, you have to use those parentheses. Okay, so the parentheses and then the squared on the outside. We get negative 104. What do we want to do next? Yep, we are stopping right here. We are finished. Whenever we get a negative underneath the square root, we immediately stop and say that it is a no real solution.